Here's Kristen Welker.
Good day, everyone. Capitol Police are briefing on that fatal security incident outside the U.S. Capitol this afternoon when a suspect rammed a car into a barrier and then wielded a knife at Capitol Police officers. At least 2 injured and the driver was killed. Let's listen.
The suspect exited the vehicle with a knife in hand. Our officers then engaged that suspect. He did not respond to verbal commands. The suspect did start lunging toward U.S. Capitol Police officers, at which time U.S. Capitol Police officers fired upon the suspect. At this time, the suspect has been pronounced deceased. 2 U.S. Capitol Police officers were transported to 2 different hospitals, and it is with a very, very heavy heart that I announce one of our officers has succumbed to his injuries. We are not able to release any information, names, age, date of birth, or anything of that nature at this time because we still have to notify the next of kin. I just ask that the public continue to keep U.S. Capitol Police and their families in your prayers. This has been an extremely difficult time for U.S. Capitol Police after the events of January 6th and now the events that have occurred here today. So I ask that you keep our U.S. Capitol Police family in your thoughts and prayers. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Metropolitan Police Chief, Mr. Robert Contee, for the Metropolitan Police Department's portion of this investigation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Contee, Acting Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department. Our members responded to the U.S. Capitol today just after 1:00 p.m. To investigate an officer-involved shooting. At this time, the Metropolitan Police Department's Homicide Division, as well as our Internal Affairs Division, will now take over the investigation with respect to the shooting death that occurred, as well as the officer's death. There's not a lot of information that we can release to the public at this time, but we certainly will be working very closely with our partners at the Park Police, at the U.S. Capitol Police. At this time, I just want to extend my deepest condolences on behalf of the entire Metropolitan Police Department to all of the officers at the United States Capitol Police for their service and unfortunately for the loss of life that have occurred here today at the United States Capitol Police.
Chief, is there an ongoing threat here on Capitol Hill or in the neighborhood? What can you tell residents that live here as well as folks that work in this area?
At this time, it does not appear to be an ongoing threat. Obviously, we're in the very early stages of our investigation. We need to obviously understand the motivation behind this senseless act. So the Metropolitan Police Department will certainly be doing that.
I know you said the suspect is dead, sir. Any reason to know that he was known to Capitol Police or MPD beforehand? Any indication that he was somebody that had been around the Capitol before, maybe spotted, anything like that?
It does not appear that he is known to the Capitol Police or the Metropolitan Police Department at this time.
Is this a terrorism-related?
Sir?
Is this a terrorism-related incident?
It does not appear to be terrorism-related, but obviously we'll continue to investigate to see if there's some type of nexus along those lines.
Will
yes,
the National Guard posture change at all? What's their mission look like the next couple of days?
I'll refer that to the United States Capitol Police.
Chief, did the suspect say anything or yell anything at the time?
I would say that at this time, the investigation is still in its preliminary stages, so we don't have that information. And the Capitol Police, as far as its security posture, remains in a steady state at this time. We are very thankful for our National Guard partnership. We do have National Guard on the campus, but the security posture at this time remains the same.
Chief, you said that obviously the motive, you're still looking at the motive. I understand that. any reason to believe that there was any specific target of member of Congress? Was there a specific member of Congress that the suspect may have been trying to go after? Any indication who that may have been, if that was the case?
We do not have the suspect on file with U.S. Capitol Police, so there's no indication at this time that there's any nexus to any member of Congress.
Can you speak also to the
Yes, ma'am.
Drugs or alcohol involved? Do you believe you found any of that in the car?
We cannot confirm that, but the investigation is
Any
ongoing.
weapons in the car?
The suspect did exit the vehicle with a knife in hand, and at that time he started to lunge toward, run aggressively toward U.S. Capitol
But in the
Police
vehicle,
Office.
any weapons?
No, that part of the investigation is still ongoing. The scene is still being processed by Metropolitan Police Department, so we will have additional information at a later time.
Is the suspect transported to a hospital?
Did
Did the suspect ever come in contact? I know you mentioned the lunge, but did the suspect come in contact and wrestle with the police officer there?
The investigation is ongoing. From what we can see from video at this time, I do not see the suspect wrestling with a U.S. Capitol Police officer, but when he exited the vehicle, the knife was clearly in his hand, and he did start to run toward the officers.
Can you describe the kind of knife, the type of knife?
So at this time, this is all the questions that I am going to take. I turn it back over to Metropolitan Police Department's chief. Again, I ask you to please keep the United States Capitol Police family in your thoughts and prayers at this time. It has been an extremely difficult and challenging year for us, but we will get through this, and we do appreciate the community's support. Thank you.
Can you give us an update on the second officer's condition?
Hey, folks. We understand that you guys have a lot of questions. Obviously, this is a complex investigation. We are going to be putting out more information as we can on social media, and if we decide to do any more briefings later on, we'll of course let you guys know right away. Thank you.
Chief, can you give us an update on...
Chief Conte, can we ask you one more question?
Sure.
One question I have, looking at the grand fabric of all of this, USCP has changed their intelligence, the way they're sharing it. They've been doing what they can to try to beef up the security here, and still they're under attack. What is the answer?
Yeah, well, I think, just part of our responsibilities and duties as law enforcement officers, we're here to protect and serve community. Clearly, this was someone who was actively trying to just get at whoever or whatever. We just don't know right now. So we have a responsibility to investigate that, to get to the bottom of this, whether the attack was at law enforcement or whoever. We have a responsibility to get to the bottom of it, and we'll do that. Thank you.
Suspect died at the scene or at the hospital, sir?
And you have been listening to Capitol Police describe the tragic events as they unfolded just a short time ago outside the U.S. Capitol when a driver rammed into the barrier, lunged at two police officers. Ultimately, one Capitol Police officer did succumb to injuries. And so yet again, the Capitol Police has lost one of their own. Of course, on January 6th, Officer Brian Sicknick was attacked when the U.S. Capitol was stormed. He passed away. And so the Capitol Police has been in mourning for quite some time, and now here yet again. This is an investigation that is in its preliminary stages. You just heard the Capitol Police say that it does not appear there is an ongoing threat at this point. They are still working to determine if there are any drugs or alcohol involved in this. It doesn't appear to be terrorism, you heard them say. Let me turn to our justice correspondent, Pete Williams, who has been tracking the developments of all of this since it first unfolded. Pete, what are your takeaways? What more can you tell us?
Well, first of all, for the police to be able to say they don't think it's terrorism, they must have a pretty good idea of who this was. Now, we're told that they have traced the car and they know who the car is registered to. What they're trying to determine is that the person who was driving it today? So the last we heard, there was still a little bit of confusion about exactly the identity of the driver. But for the Capitol Police to say there doesn't appear to be a threat at this point is instructive. And the second point, Kristen, is we're not exactly sure what the injuries were that caused the death of the Capitol Police officer, whether it was being struck by the car the way the police chief described it, it did not sound like the driver with the knife actually managed to get to the police officer and stab the police officer with the knife. But we're just not sure about that, because some of the earlier information we had is that the officer was stabbed, and that the cause of the officer's death might turn out to be more the stab wounds than being struck by the car. But that's one question that the news conference left unresolved. But obviously the big question is, who was behind the wheel? Who is that man with the knife? What was the motive for that? And it's going to be several hours before we know the answer to that. And of course, the normal investigative thing where you question the driver is not going to happen, because he did die in the hospital. And it's been, of course, just shy of 2 hours since this happened. So we're still at the very early stages of this.
And Pete, as we've been discussing, the Capitol already has an increased barrier outside of it because of the events that unfolded on January 6th, when a mob stormed the Capitol and again claimed the life of another U.S. Capitol police officer. What happens now? As you have underscored so well, this investigation is in its early stages.
Well, remember, the security here, quote unquote, worked. That car did not get past that barrier. That's what the security was intended to do. The police officers who were there to make sure it worked, of course, one of them has paid the ultimate price. But whether that means there should be more security